Hello and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Leo Costello, multimedia producer here at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. This week we're talking about a new movie called Conclave and why it's been getting some people of faith very upset. Joining me in studio is Scott Knickelbine, our
everybody.
IT director and a bit of a film buff, much like myself, I would say. How are you doing, Scott?
In fact, I once almost, my greatest claim to fame is I once almost knocked Roger Ebert off his crutches on on Michigan Avenue. So that's...
I got to hear more about that sometime. Well, anyways, as always, we want to hear your thoughts on the topics we discussed today. So if you have any questions about the film we're discussing or the reaction that it's been getting, please write in the comments below or email them to askanatheist@ffrf.org. We'll try our best to answer your questions live during the show. So, Scott, you approached me with this idea to discuss this film because of the reaction you've seen online. But first, let's talk about the film itself for those who are not familiar. Can you tell our viewers like what the movie's about?
Conclave is a novel. It's based on a novel by Robert Harris. It's about a Catholic papal conclave where cardinals from around the world gather in the Sistine Chapel to elect a new pope. In the film, the cardinal who is tasked with leading the ceremony finds himself conflicted with the intentions and secrets of the other cardinals looking to be the next pope.
And just to get everyone on the same page, let's play the trailer for the film.
The Pope is dead.
The throne is vacant.
What happened? They say a heart attack.
You know how rumor spreads, and 1.25 billion souls watching.
Well, Cardinal Lawrence, it seems the responsibility for the conclave falls upon you. The supervision of this election is a duty I never thought I'd have to perform. They are sequestered, and they must be shielded from all news that may influence their judgment. You understand? No sane man would want the papacy. The men who are dangerous are the ones who do want it. That sounds ominous. I wonder if I could have a word in private. You look anxious. Everything under control. How has this been kept a secret for so long? We'll never find a candidate who doesn't have any kind of black mark against them.
Although we sisters are supposed to be invisible, God has nevertheless given us eyes and ears.
You should be careful, Thomas.
This is a conclave, Aldo. It's not a war.
It is a war, and you have to commit to a side.
There is one sin which I have come to fear above all others. Certainty. If there was only certainty and no doubt, there would be no mystery. And therefore no need for faith.
All right. So, Scott, it's this film, and for reasons we'll get to, has been, let's say, tightening some collars.
Yeah.
But let's first talk about our reactions to the film before we get to the reactions, and we'll do no spoilers just for a little bit in case people want to check it out. What did you think of the film in general?
Well, I enjoyed the film, despite the fact that it's a little corny to my eyes. To my eyes, the sort of the ending, which is supposed to be a shock, is kind of telegraphed fairly early on in the film. But it's the cinematography is beautiful, and and it's a lot of fun to sort of be a fly on the wall while these cardinals are doing things like smoking and going to the
And
bathroom.
scrolling on their phone.
Yes, exactly.
There's one shot where one of the cardinals takes like a rip off of a vape, and it's like the funniest moment in the movie. This is a real ceremony that takes place, and the cardinals are sequestered. So people normally don't get to see what goes on in here. So the filmmakers are able to take some artistic liberties, of course, and any film that has to do with religion always perks our interest because we're always curious to see how it's depicting people of faith and what kind of things it's talking about. Usually, last time you were on the show talking about a movie about we were talking about God's Not Dead, and those films are very pro-religion in a way that's very patronizing and problematic in a way. But this film, I don't think is really taking a stance on religion. I think it's, my opinion, it's about people. There's we can show a graphic of the book, and I think there's a caption, a tagline on the book that I think captures what the movie is about. I think we'll get it up on screen in just a second here. Yes, the power of God, the ambition of men. So, the process of selecting a new pope is supposed to be this holy process, But at the end of the day, these are all men with their own goals and interests, and not all cardinals are super conservative. Not all cardinals are liberal. Everyone's different, and in this film, all of the different cardinals have their own opinions on how a pope should be poping, and it's all about what they'll do to get it, what kind of mischievous, and also the secrets that some of these cardinals have. And they all have secrets to some degree or another, and it's interesting to see how the mystery kind of plays out, especially because the main cardinal that's leading this thing, played by Ralph Fiennes, he, at the beginning of the movie, is what do you call it? Is having a crisis of faith, but not a crisis of faith of believing in God. He's having a crisis of faith in the church, and that kind of plays out in how these secrets he's finding are unveiled. But I'm sure you would agree, on a technical level, the film is really, really good.
Right. I actually have a slight disagreement with you on whether or not the film is taking no position on religion. So, obviously, it's trying to provide some balance, because you can't do a movie on the Catholic Church nowadays for a general audience and just completely ignore, what's been going on in the headlines for the last decade or couple decades or so. I mean, you can't remake the Bells of St. Mary's nowadays. So they couldn't do that, but to my mind, the basic message, the basic Catholic message about the conclave, which is essentially that God is guiding these people, guiding these cardinals to make the right decision for the church, I think basically is affirmed by this movie. And because there's many symbols and signs. I think one of the most telling ones is that right before there's all this internecine struggle and all this, but in the final ballot, this puff of wind comes in through a window that's been blown out in the Sistine Chapel, and you can see it like fluttering the ballots and everything. And then all of the cardinals basically pick up their ballots at the same time and their pens at the same time, and it's like exactly what's going to happen in that moment. And the reason is because the filmmaker really is trying to say, these papal elections are actually influenced by God. And so I think that it's really, while it's not, a squeaky clean, it's not a whitewash of the church, it's certainly not anything close to what they could have expected, particularly based on the novel, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Sure. I didn't quite have that reading, but I think once we get into spoilers, I would like to touch on that a little bit more. Sure. But if you're interested in watching the film, I'd say check it out. I don't think it's really propaganda in one way or the other.
No, by no means.
Yeah,
no.
It's certainly up for interpretation because you and I have had different takes on it. So yeah, go check it out if you want. But let's get to the main thing that's been getting people of faith really upset, is that there's this big shocking twist at the end of the film that the cardinal that they've selected to be Pope turns out to be intersex. And the way that it's revealed is that he tells the story of that he grew up a man, and I think he had an appendix issue, and he was going in for surgery as an adult, as someone who was already a cardinal. And when he was getting this surgery done, the doctors noticed he had like ovaries and a uterus, and he had no idea. So he had this big crisis of faith at that moment, because of his faith, either you're a man or a woman. And I think the film says that he wanted to resign from his position
Right. Yes.
to the cardinal, but
he goes
to the Pope.
He's actually an archbishop when he learns. When this individual learns of their intersex condition, and the Pope calls him in to make this person a cardinal, and he says, I got to tell you something.
Right.
And that's when the question about, whether he should get, whether this individual should get surgery in order to sort of assign, a gender and or not starts to come up. But none of this is known to any of the characters except.
And the Cardinals end up voting for him not knowing this fact.
That's absolutely right.
But the reason why they end up voting for him is partially because secrets get revealed of the other Cardinals that puts them off of the list of people they want. And then there's this bombing that happens in the church that you see in the trailer, and they say it's like a terrorist attack, and dozens of people died. And one of the more conservative cardinals has this speech of we got to go to war with Islam, and Benitez, I think is his name.
Correct.
That ends up being chosen. He goes. He's actually he's also happens to be the cardinal that's appointed to Kabul.
Right.
So he's like, I've seen what war can do to people. I don't think it's Christ-like to fight violence with violence, which to me sounds like a very Jesus-y kind of message, right?
Sure,
so
absolutely.
I think the film is trying to tell us that speech he gives moves them to want to support him, not knowing this other secret that might make them not vote for him. So our main character, Ralph Fiennes, is weighted with this decision at the end of the film, do I tell people or do I keep it a secret, much like the Pope did? And I think he ultimately makes the decision to keep it a secret because Benitez has come to the conclusion of, and he says in the movie, I am the way God made me. And he might not have had that opinion if he didn't find this out about himself, but because he's experienced it firsthand.
Correct.
He has this deeper, from his perspective, he has this deeper relationship with God because he is, I don't know, he has found himself in a new way. And also throughout the film, Benitez seems to be the only one whose motive is to have a relationship, a closer relationship with God, when a lot of the other candidates, it seems like they're seeking power or have some sort of political motivation. So, like you were saying, I think this does, in a way, has a very theistic message.
Oh, yeah, no, I think so.
Because I don't think that the film is. It seems that twist seems shocking to a lot of people because it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with what happened previously. But I think it ties into the theme of one of the themes of the movie that I connected to, which was this idea of faith versus certainty, which is talked about in that trailer. He says, if you're certain about your beliefs, you can be kind of blinded. And it's important, he says it's important to have doubt because without doubt, we wouldn't need faith, and faith is the thing that brings us all together, whatever. So that twist, I think, encapsulates the themes. But of course, this message went right over the head of a lot of people in the religious community. We've been seeing lots of articles online from like Catholic publications really upset about this. We'll play a clip from the is it the Catholic EWTN, which is like a Catholic news network, or not a news network, but TV network.
It's the Catholic House Network in the U.S.
Yeah, so let's play a little montage of their reaction, and they actually got a chance to talk to the filmmakers. There's a lot to dive into here, so take a look.
Well, look, if my email is any indication, Michael, the final election of the Pope in this Conclave movie is going to infuriate serious Catholics. Because to Catholics, it's not about selecting a president or king.
Or moviegoers. It's infuriating from an artistic point of view, not just a religious point of view.
Yeah, no, it ends up being a stunt and a total, in some ways, it does reinforce this idea, though, of doubt and certainty is an evil. You know, it does undermine that. But look, this is the selection for Catholics of a faith leader, a representative of Christ on earth, the vicar of Christ, who will protect the deposit of faith. Okay, here's the spoiler alert. Okay, I'm issuing this to all our viewers. The cardinal they choose in the third act is a biological woman with some birth anomaly. I asked the director, Edward Berger, Ray Fiennes, and Isabella Rossellini about this.
I know you're going to get ferocious backlash for this movie from faithful Catholics. Is that a concern for you as you were making it?
No. And to be honest, I doubt, but, you know, let me be surprised. I doubt that it'll be ferocious backlash. I hope it invites discussion, because all we need to do is discuss with each other, have an open discourse, be able to disagree with each other without hating each other, but learning from each other. That's the main thing about making a movie like this.
I feel that the film is incredibly religious, because the religions deal with the mystery, the doubt, the non-answer. And the film, once finally they have the answer, and yet the film ends with this incredible mystery and his answer, God made me this way. And I think it's incredibly religious and kind.
I think this is honestly a real problem in our society, and one of the reasons that people are so unhappy and so torn, and they all think that society is going in the wrong direction, because the highest virtue would appear to be, in the eyes of what we just heard from the filmmakers, the ability to feel doubt and uncertainty.
Yeah, well, basically, Conclave seems to suggest that all the things Jesus Christ taught are holding the church back, and if those things are overthrown, then the church can thrive. I mean, it's kind of a pagan's version of religion, all the ritual with none of the belief or dogma.
All right, there's a lot to dig into there, but I just want to point out that last statement he said, the film by no means is like going anti-Jesus. If anything, it's going...
I think what Isabella Rossellini says in that clip is absolutely correct. It's basically affirming what's happening here. It may not be presenting it as a lily-white experience, but it's affirming what's happening. But the fact that it doesn't conform with Catholic dogma is what's driving these people crazy.
Yeah, because they can't even acknowledge the idea of intersex. He just says some anomaly or whatever.
Well, they basically and we've read this elsewhere, where basically the description in official Catholic language is this individual was born a woman, raised as a man, but has this intersex condition. And the fact of the matter is, if they're intersex, they have
both parts.
That's exactly it.
But their logic is, if you have female parts, sorry, you're all woman.
The Catholic dogma is you have to be one or the other. So you can't even use the sentence that they're non-binary. You can't even say that. So you have to come up with some way of describing it, not that's accurate to the film or to the book, but that that conforms to Catholic dogma. And as a result, they completely misrepresent what's actually happening in the film.
And in a sense, they totally missed the point, because like the director was saying, the movie is meant to invite discussion, because there's a lot of nuances in what's happening here.
Certainly.
But there's a lot of people that, you know, if you're transphobic or don't understand intersex or these things, you'll see that final twist at the last 5-10 minutes of the movie, and walk out of the theater only thinking about that, and not understanding how it relates to everything else that has happened. It's just interesting to me to see them stumble over themselves, not understanding this piece of work. And like I was saying earlier, the Benitez, who gets chosen to be Pope, I think seems the most Christ-like out of all of the cardinals.
That's
by
clearly
a mile.
the movie's point of view.
Yeah. And it's so ironic to me for them to say the way of Jesus. They're saying this movie is saying the way of Jesus is evil. And the other thing the other argument we've seen is there's a cardinal, what's his name? It sounds like a hot sauce. Tedesco?
Yes, exactly. Yes, Cardinal Tedesco.
And he kind of represents really traditional, old school Catholic values, where he was the one who stood up and said, we have to fight, we have to go to war with Islam after this attack.
And in an earlier scene, he makes basically a racist comment about...
Like, we can't elect a black pope,
yeah,
basically.
exactly. That's
like, how would that look?
So this guy, the movie obviously sees him as very, very negative.
Sure, and the funny thing to me is they're like the people who are really against this movie are complaining that the traditional values are seen as negative, and then they say, but we support the really awful things that guy was saying.
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, when you hear that commentator saying, oh, all the things that Jesus Christ taught, what he's talking about is the very stuff that Tedesco is ranting about through this movie. It's like, oh yeah, the Mass has to be in Latin, and we really screwed up by abandoning the Tridentine Mass, and we have to crack down on the homosexuals, and we have to crack down on liberalism, and basically that's what's being presented. That point of view is clearly being criticized in the film. And that's what's driving them crazy, not whether or not this presents some sort of a theologically rational view of a papal conclave.
And I also really don't agree with the argument presented that, they said, oh, they made the papal conclave political. I'm like, it's always political. Because
that's so
everyone's human.
So disingenuous.
Yeah,
I mean, these guys. I mean, particularly on EWTN.
Yeah.
Particularly on EWTN, which covers blow by blow every papal conclave since they went on the air 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, they know how political it is.
And of course, some popes have been more liberal than other popes.
Correct.
Some popes have been more conservative than other popes. That's all that really means.
Yeah.
There are cardinals in the film that flat out, they say we liberals have to stick together.
Yeah, exactly. That's true, and that's perfectly reflective of how the real world cardinals see themselves. So it's essentially to say, it makes it political. That's just nonsense. They know better than that.
Any election that's voting for a person of power, that's inevitably just going to happen.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, because you've been listening to the audiobook of the original book this movie is based on a little bit, and you mentioned to me there's a bit of a difference in the languages they speak.
Well, I think that one of the biggest differences between there aren't a huge number of differences between the book and the movie. The movie actually uses many of the lines from the novel in the screenplay, cut and paste. But there have been some big changes made, and the one is that the primary character, who in the film, as he says, is Ralph Fiennes' Cardinal Lawrence.
Yeah.
And Cardinal Bellini,
Stanley Tucci.
Played by Stanley Tucci. They are both, Stanley Tucci in the film, although he has the name Bellini, is an American and an American liberal, and Fiennes' character, Cardinal Lawrence, is from the UK. In the novel, both of these characters are Italian. And then the third character, Cardinal Trombley, who's the bad guy, yeah, he's supposed to be Canadian, and he is Canadian in the movie, but in the book, he's a French Canadian. So essentially, he would be speaking at least accented, Canadian English, and not.
I would like to see John Lithgow. I would like to see John Lithgow do a French accent. That would be interesting.
He might give it a try.
Yeah, sure.
Who knows? But at any rate, so to me, changing those characters to be native English speakers basically kind of is there to make the audience more comfortable. Obviously, American audiences more comfortable. And but what it does is it sort of changes our point of view, as we're also sort of outsiders. We're not natives of Rome, and so we're not part of this whole system that's quaint and dark and mysterious and all that sort of thing. We're kind of outsiders looking in, along with Cardinal Lawrence and Cardinal Bellini. However, in the movie, those guys are Italian, and they live in the Vatican, and they are insiders. There's nothing new that's happening there. So I think that, again, that changes the way that sort of the whole Italian setting of the conclave is presented in the movie, and I think in ways that are, again, supposed to make American audiences feel more comfortable about it. I think that the other difference that's really telling is that the protagonist in the book, whose name is actually Cardinal Lamelli, spends a lot of time observing and thinking about and remembering and agonizing about all the big problems of the Catholic Church.
Which you just can't ignore.
Well, right, but
yeah.
So he spends a lot of time thinking about how mean-spirited so many of the leaders appear to be, and how corrupt it is, and homophobic and misogynistic, and all of these types of things. That's a thread that runs through the entire novel. In the film, almost all of that is actually removed. You don't really confront that. There's
a line or two.
There's one line in one conversation that they have where one of the assistants is kind of running down all the bad things that certain popes have done. But for the most part, essentially all of that stuff gets washed out of the film. Whereas you can't ignore it in the book. And again, I think that that's one of the reasons why some of these guys should actually have been grateful for the presentation that the church gets in Conclave, rather than so critical about it.
Yeah. Do you think they would have been more? Do you think those people would have been more praising it if it just didn't happen to have the intersex twist at the end?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, that's that stunt ending is right out of the book. So I don't know what they were expecting.
And do you know when the book was written?
I do not, but it was. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago was when it was published, and so I mean it was available. I mean it was a fairly popular, well-selling novel. Harris is a popular author, primarily of thriller fiction and that sort of thing. So basically, there's everybody.
We just got in our ear 2016.
2016. There you go.
Yeah.
So just a few years ago, and but at any rate, so there's absolutely no reason for anybody to be surprised at the ending. It is. You could have picked up the book and known exactly how this movie ends.
But if you're bigoted enough where even hearing about an intersex person in the Vatican is going to make you that upset. I lost my train of thought for a second. I think if you're the kind of person where that's going to upset you, you're not going to be able to see the rest of the film. You know what I mean?
Right.
That it's just like a thought stopper, and
well, that's the entire thing. I mean, you're not actually seeing the story anymore. You are essentially reacting to a particular event and how well it fits into the way that your dogmatic upbringing has led you to expect a papal conclave to end.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't do that, and that is just basically outrageous.
I remember what I was going to say a second ago. So, if you're the kind of bigoted person who gets really bothered by the intersex thing, it leads you to the conclusion that you saw in that clip we showed earlier, that they think that the movie is making an argument that the Catholic Church should put an intersex person as the Pope. That it's a movie arguing that the Church should be more progressive, but that's not really the case, because a lot of those cardinals in the movie were conservative, and it's just the film is just. It's a conclusion to the events that have happened in the film, and instead of thinking about what led up to the moment, they just think about the moment. It's so strange for me.
Well, and they're also trying to sort of enlarge the message and make it a movie that's really in your face, anti-Catholic, and all those, and that's all of that is completely misrepresenting.
Let's play one more negative clip we've seen from everyone's favorite political commentator and failed screenwriter, Ben Shapiro.
This movie is actually about how the traditional Catholic Church is evil and how the church needs to become a progressive bastion. That's what this movie is actually about. So Catholics all over the world should be extraordinarily pissed at this movie. They should be. If you are a Christian believer, if you're a person who just believes in traditional religion, you should be upset at the hijacking of one of the great institutions of world religion on behalf of progressive causes. It turns out that the reason that Cardinal Benitez was elevated in secret by the Pope is because, wait for it, Cardinal Benitez is a genetic woman. The cardinal in charge of the entire process finds this out after this person is approved as the new Pope, finds this out and goes ahead with it anyway. So the new Pope, Pope Innocent, is the name of the new Pope, is in fact a female, because it turns out that the Catholic Church can't move forward until the Pope is a genetic female, until it violates all of its precepts and scruples, and until it changes into basically a form of liberation theology, far left social policy gobbledygook.
You hear that? This film is hijacking the Catholic Church, Scott. It's hijacking it.
I like that he ended with the word gobbledygook, because that's what that all was.
Yeah.
I mean, it is completely misrepresenting what the film is actually saying, and as you just heard, once again, completely misstating how the movie ends, and including the fact that this Cardinal Benitez is not made a cardinal in secret because the Pope knows that this individual is intersex. He was made cardinal in secret because he was serving in Kabul, and they didn't want him to get killed.
Yeah.
So basically, it's like all of his entire characterization was just wrong.
Yeah, I mean, not wrong as in, like, we think he's, like, factually incorrect about the interpretation of the film.
Exactly,
like,
but again...
Benitez wasn't appointed as Pope because he was intersex.
Right. No.
It was part of the story. And also, like, even if you wanted to argue that it was because he is intersex, it wasn't just because he's intersex. It's about how he came to terms with that. That's the more important thing, because he wanted to get the surgery to get it removed. They had it scheduled, and he went to, I think, Switzerland or something.
Yes, Switzerland.
And then he decided to call it off,
right?
Because of this how would these people have reacted if he does have the surgery? He does have he does have gender. What if he did have the gender affirming surgery, right? And
well, it really would be gender assignment surgery.
Sorry.
You'd be going to the person who's intersex and saying, let's change everything that is non-male about this individual. And so, that's this Benitez decides not to do that, to accept how God made that individual, and that's what not only they can't stand, but they can't even describe. They can't even talk about it because it flies in the face of Catholic dogma, which basically says you're either a man or a woman, and there is no middle ground. There is no indeterminacy. They use the term essentially a man, essentially a woman, and if you're essentially a man, you can be ordained and can be pope, and if you're essentially a woman, you're out of luck.
Yeah, I don't think they would have accepted any ending other than Benitez just getting kicked out of town.
I think they would have loved it if Tedesco had actually been elected pope.
Oh, sure.
Then they would be all over this movie. I mean, I think
but that wouldn't be an interesting movie. It wouldn't really be saying anything other than...
No, there'd be no reason to make a movie like that unless, the people who made God's Not Dead are looking for something to do.
Sure.
But, I mean, other than that, there'd be audiences wouldn't go to see a movie like that, but that's the ending that these folks would obviously have preferred.
I mean, the big reason why we make fun of movies like God's Not Dead is because those movies completely lack any sense of nuance, and this film is all nuance.
Yes.
The film doesn't end with Benitez being elected pope, and then everybody's like, "Yay! We all love that you've been elected pope as an intersex person." First of all, most of the characters don't even know.
Yeah, right.
And second of all, Lawrence, who the film ends on, Lawrence, who has learned this information, he doesn't seem too thrilled about it. He's contemplating the weight of what just happened, and he's looking out over the balcony. And he's looking at the last shot are these nuns walking out, and they're kind of laughing at each other. And I think the ending of the film is Lawrence thinking we're in for some difficult but interesting times at the Catholic Church here.
Yeah, but I think I really got the sense from the film that in a big way the spiritual crisis that Lawrence is going through all the time in the film, in a way gets resolved because he sees a situation in which, here comes this cardinal literally from out of nowhere, and a nobody, and within a few ballots he's pope, and this individual is somebody who reflects all these values that Cardinal Lawrence himself values, and seems to have this innate spirituality that Cardinal Lawrence is in a sense jealous of. And so the fact that this is how the conclave ends, I think what we're seeing is Cardinal Lawrence having his faith affirmed, that basically, there's still lots to doubt about, obviously, but in the end, yes, the process worked out the way it was supposed to work out.
And in a way, his sense of doubt over his church was, I think that's why the Pope wanted him to lead the conclave, because of his sense of doubt, he's able to be skeptical of the cardinals that are vying for this position.
Right. And interestingly, when you read the novel, it's quite clear that the Pope who dies is supposed to be Pope Francis.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because there's references to the fact that he wouldn't move into the papal apartments in the Vatican and all that sort of stuff. So they never name him, but you basically know, they're talking about Francis. And Francis himself in 2022 gave a big talk about how important doubt was for people of faith. How doubt was, I think, what did he say? Doubt kept you from putting God into a little box that we like to keep him in. Well, it's that little box that Ben Shapiro wants to, hammer the lid down on. And
also, having a sense of absolute certainty with religion could lead to really dangerous things.
Right.
You might end up protesting a soldier's funeral, right? Or
well, yeah. I mean, that's exactly right. And so I think, in a way, this is reflective. I mean, it's an open secret that certainly the conservative wing of the Catholic Church in the U.S. has been almost schismatically resistant to Pope Francis, and this is basically to criticize this film is basically to once again criticize Francis's attempt, as imperfect and flawed as they have been, to try to at least open some of these questions up and
also
and talk to
instead
them.
of actually investing in the things the film is trying to say, just turning it into a simple culture war issue,
right,
to
exactly.
make people angry.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's get to a couple audience questions here. Let's see. Has the film been buried or censored? I don't think so. I think it's maybe in some other countries. I haven't looked into that at all. It was in theaters.
It was in theaters. It was in theaters in Europe. It was in theaters in Italy. Some film magazines have declined to publish a review about it, but others obviously have, and it's gotten a lot of very positive reviews. I think that, interestingly enough, the Vatican House organ, L'Osservatore Romano, has not said a single word about the film one way or the other.
Yeah.
So, I think there are some places that are basically trying to ignore it, but it certainly hasn't been buried.
Somebody asked, who do you think is this movie for audience-wise? Is it seeking empathy from non-believers? Is it seeking to change the way Christians view the world and people outside of themselves? I don't know. I'm not sure. I think the film was just meant to show something we normally don't get to see, because the Conclave is such a secretive thing that happens behind closed doors, and just to explore the very human disagreements that happen, because it's supposed to be this holy thing, but it's not always smooth sailing. I mean, that's why they have multiple votes, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you would think if God is telling them who to vote for, they would all vote for the same person right away, right?
You're not supposed to notice that. I think that I think that's basically correct. I would say that we can't overlook the fact that in the end this movie is a thriller, and it's kind of a mystery movie, whodunit, and so consequently, I mean, I think it's supposed to appeal to, in good measure, to the kind of people who like those kind of movies.
Oh, sure.
But also, there's a certain voyeuristic fun about looking where you're not supposed to be looking, which is in a sealed papal conclave, and looking at what you imagined would really be happening.
I think you could definitely not read it as religious commentary and just see it as a simple thriller mystery, because you're never quite sure who you can trust in the film.
Absolutely, that's
is that person lying? Are they not lying?
The sense of paranoia is just heightened, and it's heightened by the settings. It's heightened by the way that everybody's, dressing in some weird costume. All of this kind of stuff. Yes, it's definitely it probably has more to do with the ritualistic scene in Eyes Wide Shut than it probably would like to admit, but. So there's that. Again, I thought it was a fun movie to watch. certainly not life-changing, but but it was a fun movie to watch. And I think it basically, I don't know whether it's simply an attempt to avoid offending anybody, but I think it does, in fact, it basically says, yes, God's still in control of the Catholic Church. And that should be a really exciting message for like EWTN, but they don't see it that way.
Let's do another question here. Do you think the film does enough to show Tedesco's outdated ideas should be discarded? Could we have been? What could have been done to improve this point of the film? I don't think the film goes out of its way to say Tedesco is a bad guy. Our protagonist disagrees with him, but I don't think he's the only one that has that point of view.
Yes, although I don't know. I mean, and maybe I'm just doing too much projecting here, but particularly it's sort of the climactic scene where there's been this bombing attack right outside the Sistine Chapel, and everybody's, the cardinals are like all still covered with plaster and everything, and they're sitting there arguing about what to do. And Tedesco gets up and says, we have to fight these people, and we have to, and my visceral reaction was, yeah, this guy sounds like a real war hawk. It sounds like he's out for blood. And I don't think that's supposed to be perceived by the audience as positive. But, I mean, Tedesco is clearly seen as the bad guy throughout this movie.
It's so strange
but we don't really get a sense of in depth. I mean, we get a lot of it. A lot of his badness is basically presented by the fact that he was never on board with Vatican II. So I don't think that's. I mean, I don't think that a lot of his political views come out until that last scene. So it's not. That's really not a huge part of
true.
why
The attack kind of triggers that part of him. And I was looking at a couple YouTube reviews from like conservative, like influencers or whatever. And one of them was talking about that scene and agreeing with Tedesco there, and then said that Benitez came out and said like, yeah, love and let's live and let live and love or whatever. And I was thinking, who do you think Jesus was?
Well, that's part of it. But he's also saying, look, you guys can talk about war. I've actually seen it, and you don't want to go there. And that's how I read that message. It's like, guys, you want to ramp up a new crusade, and believe me, and that's really what Tedesco was talking about, in a sense. I mean, he's saying, we basically have to take arms against Islam. I mean, that's very familiar language in church history.
Here's an interesting question. This is more of a broad question about art in general. Once artwork is in the hands of the public, the initial intent of the artist can be overwritten by whatever meaning the public ascribes to it. I think that's true.
Sure.
Do you believe that this film will lose its intentional intent due to the outrage over it? I don't know. I mean, that's a broader question about, does a filmmaker's intent really matter? I'm not sure. I think the outrage will definitely die out over time. That's what always happens.
I think, what's going to happen is, in a way, it's almost going to be like a film like The Last Temptation of Christ.
Oh, sure.
Which is basically, you're either not going to see it at all because you're angry about it already, or because or Father O'Malley told you
not
it's a mortal sin to go see it.
Yeah.
Or you're going to see it, or you may actually see it for the opposite reason, for the opposite political reason. It's pissing people off, so I want to see what's happening. So in a sense, that's going to control how people are approaching this movie, and whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think this was a good discussion. I don't think if you're a non-believer and atheist like us, I think the film's still interesting. It has some it's trying to give you an inside look at the inner goings of this event that you normally don't get to see. And on that alone, it's for a film that's mostly people talking in rooms, it's pretty engaging.
Yeah, very good, yes.
Well, that wraps up this week's episode of FFRF's Ask an Atheist. A new episode of our broadcast TV show, Free Thought Matters, airs this weekend. Our co-presidents, Annie Laurie Gaylor and Dan Barker, will sit down with former U.S. Senator Russ Feingold to discuss our secular constitution.
This is a fantasy land of the right, that if they can't win elections, what they want to do is to use this mechanism to essentially, in my view, put in the Constitution white supremacy, which, as it was, or to re-up white supremacy in the Constitution, which already exists. So this is a dangerous group of people. Many of the same people, the theoreticians behind it, are the people that were behind January 6th. Some of the legal advocates there, some of whom are being charged now for what happened there. Same people are the people that advise them at these conventions as are behind this. So shouldn't fool ourselves. This isn't some independent grassroots thing. This is driven by the very far right billionaires in this country that don't like to pay any taxes.
You'll be able to watch that episode on TV stations around the country this weekend and soon on the FFRF YouTube channel.
And don't miss our weekly radio show, Free Thought Radio. This week, Dan and Annie Laurie will speak with Bible scholar John J. Collins about whether or not the Bible justifies violence. You can find Free Thought Radio at ffrf.org/radio or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to check out the latest episode of We Dissent, the only podcast hosted exclusively by women constitutional lawyers discussing state-church separation. Listen and subscribe to We Dissent wherever you get your podcasts, or check them out online at we-dissent-org.
You got it. Finally, if you want more information about the Freedom from Religion Foundation, check out our website at ffrf.org. If you're a member already, thank you so much. If not, please join us. We'll see you next time on FFRF's Ask an Atheist.